I'm here to talk about hiring for potential. A bit about me before we do, not too much. That was a lovely introduction. I'm with Achieve Partners. We are one of the largest global investment firms focused on what we call the future of learning and earning. So I think what we're all here for. And I've seen up on the slide here, a few of the companies we work with that you may have come across. Some of the writing I've done you may have seen. And I'm here to talk about hiring for potential, and particularly new US models that we're using to hire for potential today. So before I do that, I want to outline two stories that we use to talk about the talent market. So here's the first story. Massive talent shortage, right? Where's the talent? Under 70% of EU and UK businesses are struggling to find qualified talent today. Over half of EU businesses struggle particularly to recruit technical talent, and the GDP losses associated with that loss of talent, that gap in talent, are in the many trillions of dollars. So this is story number one, massive talent shortage, particularly, but not only, in technical areas of our economy. Here's story number two, then where's my job? So we have over 5 million open roles today in the EU and UK. That number is 11 million in the US. And yet we have 3 times that number of people who are unemployed in the EU and the UK. And worse, we have over 9 million people who aren't even in that figure. They have actually dropped out of the workforce. And finally, I've got a question mark here for underemployment. So underemployment is when an individual is working a job that is below the level of their degree or certification. And it's not just theoretical. Underemployed individuals make about $10,000 less annually than their fully employed peers, and they stay that way. If your first job is an underemployment job, you are very likely, most people are still underemployed 5 and 10 years later. So that's story number two. And we've got these two stories, a massive surplus of jobs, and yet we've got this surplus of talent too. So where's the gap, right? We talk a lot about the skills gap today, but I want to talk about ways that technology has changed the employment landscape that are part of driving this gap. So I'm going to talk about 2 changes in how technology has changed employment. Here's the first change. The entry-level career has changed. So entry-level jobs used to be manual. You showed up to work, you brought the coffee, you organized the papers, and you learned how the industry worked along the way. But those manual tasks have been automated away. Now, they're not filled by robots, right? We don't live in a robot economy, but they've been filled by technical platforms that are supposed to make the entry-level job easier. So these are platforms like Salesforce in sales, Zendesk in customer service, Workday in HR, Epic in healthcare IT. There are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of these technical platforms that are supposed to be making entry-level jobs easier. And so what you're starting to see here is that across entry-level roles, not just in technology roles, but in all roles across industries, technical skills are specified in the job description over and above cognitive and soft skills. So you can be resilient, you can be agile, you can be a learner, but you won't get the job if you don't know Salesforce. And colleges are not teaching these skills. So Epic, Salesforce, Zendesk, Workday, there are probably less than 5 colleges in the US that train for these skills. And there's 2 major reasons. We like to call them the "it's not our job" problem. This is a cultural problem, right? Educational institutions, and this goes for high schools too, they don't want to train for this stuff. It's not interesting, it's not exciting. We want to talk about teamwork, collaboration. Professors hate Salesforce. They don't want to touch it. And the second problem is the "we're getting there" problem. This is an institutional problem. We've started an innovation lab. We've hired somebody. They're working on it. They're going to get back to us in a year, and our curriculum cycle is every 3 years, and it runs through a committee. So you've got this institutional inability or unwillingness to move at the speed of the market and embed skills that workers need into curricula. So here's change number 2. Technology has also changed how we hire, all of us, right? And you're all familiar with this. We hire online. We hire through online job platforms, and that means that hiring is national, sometimes global, and we get hundreds, thousands, sometimes millions of job applications for every job posting. Google gets 1 million applications for every software engineer job. And we literally cannot possibly filter all of these applications. So we're using applicant tracking systems. That's the large majority of employers use them today. And we're adding filters at the top of funnel to make sure that the resumes that are even seen by a human are relevant. And what are we putting into these filters? We are putting technical skills at the entry level. And we're putting in something else too. So it's hard to assess for skill, particularly for younger entry-level talent. And so we're cheating a little bit. We are asking for 2 to 3 years of experience in the platforms that we want people to know. And so what you'll see today is that the majority of entry-level jobs not only ask for technical experience, they ask for 2 to 3 years of prior work experience. So this is a massive catch-22 for young people or for people trying to transition careers. They can't get that first job because they haven't already done that first job for 2 to 3 years. So we need bridges. Candidates and employers today cannot solve this problem on their own. And there are a lot of problems that are keeping them from making the investments that build that bridge. On the candidate side, it takes time to upskill, it costs money to upskill, and most importantly, I have uncertainty about that outcome, right? If I've already spent money on college, I don't want to attend a boot camp, or I don't want to, spend time online figuring out what I ought to know. So there's that lack of certainty. And on the employer side, we all know, bad hires cost money. They cost money in your organization when they don't perform. It's hard to fire. That costs money. And probably worse is if we try to train talent and then they leave to a competitor, we've lost twice because now we've wasted money on training and we've trained our competitors. So there are real problems keeping us from making these investments. COVID has actually made it even harder, right? We're actually getting pickier now because we're hiring online, sometimes fully online. And so we're asking people to raise the bar. We're asking for collaboration skills like Asana, Slack. We're asking for a level of sophistication, motivation, right? Self-management. And we're using age and experience as a proxy for these skills. So what would a good bridge look like that sat in between candidates and employers? Well, first, it would be obsessively designed backwards from that first job. It would land you that first 2 years of experience. So it doesn't worry about how resilient you are after that job. It is obsessively focused on day one. And that's training in the technical and the soft skills that help you to land that job. At a minimum, you're not invisible in the ATS anymore. But at a maximum, you're really good at that day one job. It's also a shorter and a cheaper pathway. Candidates don't have to leave the workforce for 4 years, or they don't have to spend, $30,000 to $100,000 getting the skills that they need. And finally, it increases certainty. So it increases the likelihood as a candidate that this works, that I'm going to get employed, and as an employer that this candidate's going to work out. So this is the first big shift in the industry in the US, boot camps. We all know what boot camps are. They're fairly normal now in the employment world. They're designed backwards from the first job, right? They're obsessively focused on day one. They train in technical and soft skills. Employers tend to complain that they're very, very focused on day one. So there's sort of a bottoming out. There's kind of an MVP level skill set. They may not be more rigorous than that. They're shorter and cheaper for candidates. Candidates still have to fork up money up front, so I gave them sort of one check on my assessment here. And they increase certainty. They are better outcomes than college, 70 to 80% placement versus 60%. And they're better outcomes for employers. And probably most interesting about boot camps is there's a quick cycle to accountability that is actually increasing that level of certainty. So a good boot camp delivers outcomes for candidates and for employers, and it stays alive and it grows. And bad boot camps fail, and they fail quickly. So you're going to start to see more boot camps enter the space and grow, and more boot camps fail, and that's actually okay. You want a solution that doesn't serve candidates or employers to fold. So what would be checks across the board? That's the question we sort of started thinking about at my firm over the past 10 plus years. Design backwards from the first job, training in the right skills, even cheaper than a boot camp, maybe free, and high certainty, a sort of low or no risk proposition to candidates and employers. So this is the model. This is the US version of apprenticeships. And I'll talk it through. But the difference between this model and a sort of EU-UK apprenticeship model is that it's run by intermediaries, staffing firms, consulting firms. So Optimum Healthcare IT is one example. They're a staffing firm. And they staff Epic analysts to US hospitals. So Epic is that mysterious system that runs the majority of US hospitals that no one knows how to use. And there's a massive shortage of Epic analysts. And they cost about $100,000 to $200,000 a year, and then they leave you for your competitor. What Optimum is doing is they are hiring Epic analysts, young people, graduates from college, from day one, as full-time employees with benefits. And then they're paying them to train for 3 months and learn how Epic works, and learn in teams, learn some of the project-based work skills. And then after that, they are placing them with employers as consultants on a consulting basis for 1 to 2 years. And the promise that Optimum is making candidates is, I will pay you to learn, I will pay you to surpass the skills gap, and if you don't get placed, if you sit on the bench, that's on me. I'll pay you for that too. It's my job to get you placed. And the reason they can do that is that they're also going to employers on the other end and saying, I've got great candidates for you, but I can give you to them with no risk. If you don't like them, send them back, it's on me. They're contractors. So you don't have the W-2 issues, you don't have to worry about hiring and firing, test them out. And what happens is employers start by testing out 1 Epic analyst, and then they come back for 5, and then they come back for 50. And Optimum has just started getting its first orders of 100 Epic analysts. And the reason is because if you're allowed to take chances on talent, hire talent, and then train them, and then figure out a way to test them out at low or no risk to employers, you're actually able to make that match. You're able to get good talent, and you're able to convince everyone in the process to play along. So Optimum is now at 200 plus people that they're training on a kind of quarterly basis to staff out to US hospitals. So what happens with this model if you de-risk career paths for entry-level talent? Well, so we're talking about a talent shortage, right? There's not a shortage of young people, college degrees, highly skilled, but don't know Epic. There's literally millions of them. So Optimum has no problem with applicants. They have too many applicants, right? So what do? They need really strong assessments at the top of the funnel. They can't get away with ATS screens. It has to be deep, robust assessments on skills across, cognitive, soft, technical skills, technical aptitude. And they have to really lean in and pay for those robust assessments. And then finally, you get an increase in diversity. Optimum's cohorts have been majority-minority from day one. And you get an increase in quality because there are a lot of people who have been ignored by the market, who are highly skilled, and who are willing to stay with you if you take a chance on them. So many folks here who are in the UK or EU locally can rightly accuse us in the US of simply discovering apprenticeships, but maybe 1,000 years later. This is correct, right? This is what we're doing. And there are a few different models of apprenticeship around today. You've got the Central European model, where there's deep collaboration between government and industry. There's a lot of funding. It's been hard to replicate outside of that locale. You've got the really interesting UK model, where you've got effectively a tax, right, the levy, that forces employers to try to figure out how apprenticeships work. And what's actually happened is that's given a rise to apprenticeship service providers, folks like Multiverse, who sit behind programs and administer apprenticeships to make it easier for employers. And then this is the US model, and it's outsourced. It's intermediaries, staffing, consulting firms who sit in between candidates and employers, and they take that risk away from them. So there's many different models here that are possible in reinvigorating apprenticeships. The US is one we've had to develop without any government funding, effectively, because our government is well behind. But it works. And so what I want you guys to think about are ways that you can test apprenticeships, ways that you can take chances on talent, and particularly how you think about building bridges with intermediaries that make these connections and actually help all parties de-risk. So I want to live in a world where all of these models exist, they're all funded, and they all work, and they become the future for entry-level employment. So that's all I've got today. I'm happy to talk more about it. Please check us out at Achieve Partners. We are continuously investing in the future of learning and earning, and we're always happy to talk about it.